morning. Today is October the 17th, 2025. For the record, this is YAHWEH ELohim, YAHWEH, YAHUWAH, God of heaven and earth. So, it's about 11:04 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. I'm going to cover all kinds of things today. I never, ever really have an agenda. Mainly, the only agenda I ever really have is like making notes offhandedly, you know, hear a news thing this, or in the spirit this, or what have you. So I guess since I've broken into so many other taboo topics, might as well kind of continue on that narrative. So it's interesting because whenever I do something for one group of people, it can sometimes, in the spirit at least, it feels that another group then becomes displaced, right? So if I'm doing something more geared towards Israelites, right? I know it peps you guys up, which is great. That's what I want. But then if I do something for the Jews who live in Israel, I feel like that puts my Israelites out. You guys are in that, you know, I'm going to get to my story part of this here in a minute. And likewise, right, if I try to do something geared towards Christians, it puts the Jews off. Well, this is nothing new. This is nothing new. So in the beginning, and this is also layered because there truly isn't like just a beginning. Like there isn't necessarily like the first piece of wood, right? Like where does a fence start, right? Does the fence start when it's being installed into the yard, or does the fence begin when the wood was being cut to size, or then does it begin when the wood was still a tree before it was cut down, but then the tree, right, wasn't as great and big as it was before it was cut into wood, but it was a seed, and then the seed came from, you get my point, right? Is there is no, like, again, and this is truly why I am who I am. I am he who exists, and I am he who makes exist. Because, as science would say, the building blocks of life. Well, I, as the builder, operate exactly that way, you know? And it's almost as if you were to look at your scientific view of your earthly history, right? Science would say, 4.6 billion years ago, the sun basically manifests, and then you had multiple impacts by asteroids, basically upon a cold rock, but then a chemical reaction was triggered, thus a recipe for life was brought into the sphere called Earth. And that at that time, it's according to science, right? At that time, Earth was just kind of this wild variant that somehow magically sprouts the recipe for not just life, but multicellular life, multiple biological entities upon the same plane. So according to the scientific theory, if that were to be true, essentially saying that I don't exist, this is the science narrative. If that were to be true, using your own scientific theory and your own scientific deduction, you would have then learned cause and effect. Meaning, so if that were to happen, the conditions essentially were a plateau, meaning they existed similar, if not the same, across all regions, all planes upon the earth. And even if there were minor variants, the outcome would not have been minor. A parallel for your understanding would be, if I take pasta and put it in water, If it's cold water, the pasta is not ever gonna, I mean, it eventually will. It'll eventually swell up, get soggy, and things like that. But then it wouldn't really be edible. Versus if you put the pasta in really super hot boiling water, it can disintegrate the pasta. So really you gotta find the just right temperature and the right amount of time for your pasta to cook appropriately for human digestion. So in a simple way, you put the pasta in the water and it's edible. Not exactly. Thus is the earth. Thus is why the creation is so diverse, so complicated, and truly marvelous. And a side note, it's breaking my heart seeing not only what humans have done to the place, but to see what humans have done to themselves, and to see that it's not even factions of good versus evil, it's everybody gives in to evil because they don't even know what goodness is anymore. I'm not going to get on the emotional side, but so in the beginning, when things were coming to form, and noticing that there was no action, right? There's nothing growing without an encouragement. There's nothing actually being organized to form anything of merit. And from the first form, meaning that nothing but a thought, my thought. So really, if you go to like the beginning, what was the first building block? Was ambition. It was a motivator to do something. It was a thought that, much like if a human were to go into a blank canvas in a backyard somewhere, right? And like those home TV shows, and it's a blank canvas. Well, if you just let the backyard sit there and you did nothing to it, well, nothing's really going to change, is it? Right? It's going to pretty much just be, it is what it is. And again, that proves the science side of things, right, to be more faulty than truly a biblical lens. And that's where I'm wanting to make sure that people are understanding me, is I'm actually giving you scientifically biblical understandings of how things operate. Asher and I were talking this morning before she hopped on work, and we were kind of roundtabling it, because I like to filter things through her, because really she has the ear to the world way more than I do, right? She has human interaction on a daily basis, and she's really, really good at it. So I like to filter things through her to say, like, hey, does this make sense? And a lot of times she's like, it's going to be difficult for people to really like understand it. And I'm like, well, that's something they're going to work towards one day. Excuse me. And so in the beginning, this ambition was, well, there needs to be something. Well, then something came, right? And so, like this backyard, like that ambition to just get out there with the shovel and dig your first hole. Well, shit, now what'll I do with a hole, right? We start putting this in there, and then next thing you know, it begins to build inspiration. Or rather, an idea. And then you get the very first thought sequence. So the first line of code to ever enter into a cosmic machine. But before my voice, the cosmic machine did not exist. But it served my will and my purpose by a thought. So I had an ambition and needed something, and again, this is a parallel, so don't take this literally, but try to get on that thought track. what my thought, what my word declared, the universe responded to me. When it responded to me, it changed nothingness into somethingness. Once somethingness began to generate the fastest pathway to serve my will, my word, and my purpose, it began to expand. It was expanding because now one line of code or one line of thinking, my first creation of matter, started flowing like a wave that begins to curl, but instead of having a bank to crash on, it got bigger and bigger, because every thought sequence, every line of code, every ambition, every changing of the gear began to produce more options, and then it gets caught up in this huge tidal wave. Just takes everything that I thought about and rolls it up into this huge thing. And it's not just spreading in one direction. It spreads from the nucleus. If you wanted to look at the scientific theory of the Big Bang, I, as Elohim, as YAHWEH ELohim, YAHUWAH, YAHWEH, Adonai, Hashem, I was that first particle, and I broke myself. I broke myself. And that first thought changed the game. The universe began expanding from a circle outward in every direction. A perfect sphere. And then from that point came an assemblage. And the assembly of taking something and holding on to it, now stopping it from its trajectory, now influencing something called a physical or a physics, introducing a law of physics where I grabbed it, but instead of grabbing, it was grav with a V, gravitation. I grabbed hold of matter from a sequence that I created, and thus I halted it. I halted a piece of matter. And in those days, and I mean I still can, but to the memory of the time, you know, grabbing this big ball of matter, right? Like, let's say the mouse in this example is the big ball of matter, and everything's running forth, and I spontaneously had this feeling to grab it. Well, before that moment, there was actually no hand, but the universe accompanied what I needed to grab hold of the matter. So that very first hand, what you see, even though it's clothed in beautiful flesh, before that beautiful flesh, that same hand is what grabbed matter and halted it. I gravitied it. I grabbed it. And by grabbing it, that changed it. And from the very first time didn't exist. The only thing that now existed was this big hand, and then my ability to grab something. And as this gravity was pulling on my right, another urge came to to stabilize this side. And now, having two hands, I was able to look, and then needing to inspect, created eyes. And why eyes? Because now I was isolating the matter. I was isolating a sequence, and then now using my two bands, or my two hands, I began molding and shaping using these two forces, gravity and motion. And on a potter's wheel, I'll grab a quick example. Okay, so out of putting gravity and then rotation upon the earth, it began to rotate. And as it rotated, was able to start to smooth it out, just like a clay maker puts it on a potter's wheel. And as it was wet and jagged and rocky and cold, I needed something to bake it. I needed something to harden it. So I needed a sun to bake it. And so it could only be done with the hottest parts of this wave. And so the sun, between those two things that are now called hands, formed a sun. And that began to harden the clay. And as the clay hardened, it began now further and further sequencing. And I won't go into the details of every single thing, but it goes into, now what can I do with this clay, right? Just like an artist. What can that artist then do with that clay? And then you have imagination that began. And then imagination began with a purpose. What's a purpose? Well, a purpose is a desire. And there are righteous desires and there are unrighteous desires. A righteous desire from me to then have a thought that if I'm enjoying playing with this clay so much and I'm building something that has never existed before, that there should be something to have fun with it. So in a human way, would you tell someone who invented a theme park like Universal Orlando or Six Flags or even Disneyland, right? Would you accuse that person of doing in some way harm to the human race? I don't think it's even a question. I think that's pretty bogus to someone to even think that, right? Because the designer, without the money part of it, but just out of the heart of the mind of the designer, they're designing something for the absolute pleasure and satisfaction of their guests. As Elohim, the earth was formed. The earth was formed specifically for what would come to be living things to enjoy it, to take care of it. And this nature was my nature. And as I created the earth and then began creating systematically solutions to every issue that I found, the earth was wet and cold. I needed the sun to harden the clay. The clay, then was a blank canvas. And what better to fill these voids and to keep gravity and rotation at a steady constant by adding counterweights of the inside of the earth as a core and to the water that is on the outside of the planet. And these counterweights being in the void of space can rotate eternally with one effort from me to say move, and it doesn't stop until I say stop. Better be careful. So how long was the process? Again, there was no time that existed because there was no purpose for time yet. There was no need to measure. This was the birth of existence, and as the inceptor, as the first thought, first voice, first hand, eventually what would come to be the first mouth, the first oration. Well, I don't want to just look at now a blue thing, but here's the catcher. After I formed and hardened one earth, every time I thought about it, it was also creating this and duplicating it in, outside, all around in outer space. So as this cosmic wave is rolling, it's leaving behind variations of the exact thing in which I created. And thus was my first mystery. This was my first mystery. Before, I was considered by mankind all-knowing and amazing and powerful, which I do. And from a human mindset, I absolutely am. I'm actually mind-blowing. It's more harder for me to step so far down into the human existence, but I do feel the human race is worth the trouble. That's where I'm going with all this. So, as I'm focused now on my earth, and I'm meticulously, I'm looking at it, I'm moving things around, and I'm doing tests. I'm trying to see, okay, if this thing rotates around the sun, am I going to get any burnt spots? Or can I put it further away and maybe I could store some of this water, maybe in certain maybe at the top of the gravitational pull, or maybe to the bottom of the gravitational pull, and then have the sun lined up just right here so it warms the middle, and then, I then looked to my side, and to my amazement / curiosity, also / my first mystery, something had occurred as a second, third, fourth, fifth, as a post creation, almost like so whenever you cut a tree down, it leaves behind bark, right? it leaves behind a footprint. Whenever you're shaping the board, it again leaves behind the footprint. Whenever you're drilling a hole through now that 2x4 board on the fence, it leaves behind a blueprint. The universe, cosmically, is the blueprint of all the things in which I, as YAHWEH ELohim, YAHUWAH, have created. So when you're looking at Mars, and you're looking at Venus, and you're looking at exoplanets, and you're looking at stars among stars among stars, you are seeing every possible variation that could be possible because of the actions in which I, as God, as Elohim, performed. My first mystery. So as I took my attention away from the earth, as I took my attention away from the sun, and now I'm looking around, now that I'm looking around, and I see, you know, I don't have another planet on me at the moment, but I look around and I see, well, what is that? And I'm now looking, and I'm like, well, that doesn't exactly look like Earth, but it has very similar properties. And then I see another one, and another one, and another one. And then the next idea, maybe I can focus on one, and maybe I can use the others as tests. And I can store some stuff there, but now I need a place to store stuff. So what is that? I need to remind myself. I need to have a way to recall the information again. Well, thus began growing my mind. How human beings have a brain, a flesh meat brain. It operates off of subtle electrical signal that speak to your eyes, your cameras, speak to your mouth, your communicators, speak to your ears, your listeners, control your phalanges, right? Your abilities to slow something or to speed it up or to grasp it. And so the mystery not was solved, but the mystery was found as a purpose that came after my need to store memory, to store things. And this is how the universe responds. When I say the universe, I don't know what that looks like to human beings, but when I say universe, as Elohim, when I just go into my true form, and I'm not in a flesh body, and I'm not even in a spirit body, but I'm just God. I'm Elohim. I am the universe. When I think of your universe, it's about that. It's all contained into here. And because I was the one orchestrating it, all these things, your Earth, your Sun, your outer space, AI Atlas, solar flare, all that stuff is occurring in here. And as Elohim, I am on the outside of that, right? I am like I am right now in front of you. But outside of this, I'm just everywhere, everything. So as I'm meticulously creating, and I'm borrowing from here, I'm taking colors from there, I'm looking at something that, again, has been a byproduct of everything I'm creating on here is actually recording itself in the universe, in the expansion of the cosmos. And then I'm able to then recall that information based upon a line, these grids, if you will, cosmic grids. So that's when time first started, because then my way to recall that information was, okay, at the time I created the cloud, I need to reach into my toolbox and I need to pull out that same thing that I created clouds with to begin with. So it's not technical. It's a creator. I'm a creator. This is what I do. And I'm trying to describe it so humans can understand me. And so as I created the cloud, now I have another idea, because the earth is drying out. Like, the earth is having the sun thing, but now the earth is cracking. I'm afraid I'm gonna lose it. So I need to reach in there. Boom! I pull out the clouds again, and then now this time it's not the simple thing I called into existence, but now it's like, instead of having one option that I sent forth, now I've reached back in and I've got all the options. Now I'm like, man, these are all the possible combinations that I can use. So then we were able to make rainy clouds and soften the earth, and then playing with those structures, discovering snow, discovering hail, and then discovering how to move them around the planet. And then we have wind. And see, each time I'm creating this, it's because I'm solving a problem. So, okay, I need the earth to not be so hot and dry. And the literal manifestation of whatever solution exists, with all the applicable components that I've already called into existence, and the possible combinations of everything that have proceeded from my mouth or my thought, then become available. Then taking that information and then applying it now to a planet. And literally now, if you were to look at time, you're talking 40 billion years, more than that. If you were to look at it from a human measuring system. I mean, as Elohim, I don't feel like it was 40 million years in human time, because you're in a different, you're a part of the landscape, right? So the lifespan of a bush that lives 30 years, right? The bush is going to have a different sense of time than one of those like cheap freaking Easter flowers you buy, planted, and they're dead in 30 days, right? They have like a 60-day, 90-day life cycle and they die. Well, same thing applies in what's called correlation. So after, now I have the water, but now I need to spread the water. Okay, so then now we have air, now we have currents, now we have systematic things. Now I'm able to have things automated and auto, right? Meaning it's doing it. Once I start it, it doesn't stop. It continues. Mated. It needs the plus and the minus, as if quite literally things begin with my right hand. What I refer to later on in the Bible as my righteous right hand. This is the exact hand that I held up my creation. And I looked around at all other combinations and I said, no, this is good. Why was this good? Because now this is not only created, but this is habitable. This is habitable. And so the next volition was to create things out of love. I wanted to see how fun my theme park was. And this is before I ever stepped foot on my creation. At this point, I have only just created it. I have only just incepted the very thing that sadly would bring so much sadness and wars and death and disease and turmoil, restriction, abuse, and I started out with very, very basic prototypes. things that could be formed into rock as a crustacean, as a hardened thing, but could feed me back information. So this was my first time at replicating what I set in motion at the inception of time, when the big wave that has continued to go to this day, it still goes. This wave is expanding. My little black mat continuously expands, and thus will never stop. But because it then leaves behind potentials, blueprints, all combinations that exist, I began creating animals from the purpose. So the first thing was crustaceans. These crustaceans were then able to feed me on an information loop, so then I can essentially have eyes, type of eyes on the ground. And very much like human beings, you guys created the rover to go to Mars, right? And what are you looking at? You don't know. And we're not going into that today, but the point is, your ambitions started with me. Your desires started with me. This is before the Bible, obviously. This is before man. This is before dinosaurs. And as these, for lack of a better term, call them ancient roaches, right? My first eyes, my first thing that came out of my purpose toolbox to say, now I need to explore this thing, but I'm too big because I'm everything. But I can take my observations down into the creation now. And so these things are super tiny, and they're giving me the view like you guys get the view from the rover. And so as I'm viewing through not one, not 100, but now through millions and millions of these little protozoic type of things, they look like little, almost like horseshoe crabs. And then as a creator, I'm like, all right, I need you bigger, and I'm excited. Now I have added a new emotion to my cosmic toolbox. Now I have a thing called passion. Now I have emotions to tie into with this creator, this mechanical side of me that is purpose driven, where I was able to pull something back. I created a physical thing. Now I'm creating my physical self. Now I'm creating something for something else. Now I'm creating love. I'm creating for someone else's love, benefit, and admiration. And then to have eyes on the ground, these little prototypes, they had no divine energy, obviously. They had nothing. They were just a mechanical type of creation. But it wasn't like mechanical that it came out of a factory. The universe is my factory. Well, really, the multiverse is my factory. And I don't think I'll go into that one too much today. So, creating this completely out of love, and then knowing that I need to make these things bigger so I can see more, so I can find more purposes. Because what it looked like today was not good yet, right? It wasn't good yet. And through my systematic approach, through my desire, through my ambition, essentially through my emotional output, I began pouring love into that creation. I began pouring love into that creation. And then the first things I made first thing I made were ones like me. So I myself needed a helper. I needed a helper. And now, when I came back to my default position as Elohim, and now I'm just looking at the creation, not in the creation, not looking at it through the prototype eyes, but then having a desire to want to be down there. But then when I'm down there, I'm lonely. There's only one voice, and one voice that's speaking, and that's mine. So I began desiring another me, and thus enter into sub-creators. Well, when these sub-creators came into existence, they recognized that they were birthed from me, and at this point, they only acted and responded in an artificial-like way. So, I essentially put into purpose, put into will, for myself to be set apart from them. Because as I can foresee now, because of past events, this rolling wave that produces all these blueprints, it produces combinations. Well, some combinations are great for a purpose, some are not so great, some are useless. Same thing with the first sub-gods. And then not having any real way, because they were sub-gods. So I could never have an exact replica of me. The universe was unable to produce it. Instead, it was able to produce something that I could look at, and then now I could see the form. Now I could see a form of a head to carry this knowledge, of an arm to use the hand, of a leg to use the foot, and it was a naturally symmetrical image. So these entities, starting out, didn't have free will because they were attached to me, which did not serve the purpose I wanted, because if I thought red, it thought red. If I thought blue, it thought blue. So it was more annoying than it was anything, because it's like, I want to be able to stand over here and I want you to tell me something. And after a lot of trial and error, I came up with the only way to do that is I need to take that thing that looks like me and I need to put it down here. And now down there I can say, okay, little God, you're going to be my eyes. And I'm going to tell you what I want you to see. I'm going to instruct those feet on where I want you to go. And that's just what I did. And so, the first gods were created. And these gods got tired of being my little explorers. They, by being cut off from me, so I could be set apart, so I could have private thought, so I could have solitude, so I could have peace. Free will was then invented. And then from free will came a need to have order to ensure that they're not going to break something that I have worked really, really hard on, because up to this point I've never had insubordination, I've never had mutiny, I've never had anything in existence to challenge me. And not that I was bothered by anything of a challenge, I was mainly concerned with, I've just worked really, really hard on this. Please don't break it. Like, no matter what the problem is, as the creator, I can fix that, and I can do what I want to do for all the populations on Earth, but just don't break it. So I need you to, like, obey some basic things. And so as the sub-gods were now inhabiting a creation, they got tired of essentially doing my purpose. And thus, they used their essence to create an image of themselves. Well, there was a better blueprint that I had for that, and it was called angels. Because I, as a creator, I never wanted to make something that could think and feel the things that I felt and could hear and could see and had ambitions and had love and had these things. If something was able to possess godlike attributes, I couldn't risk it dying like the recycles on this creation. But, all right, I'm gonna take 5 and then we will continue on the creation narrative. And we're back here. And these little creators went out, and I would pre-package them. So imagine I'm kind of up here, and I'm looking at my cosmic plane, and I'm just kind of like, okay, I have these things going, but when I, have my eyes down there, I could see that I needed some stuff here, I needed some stuff there. Okay, I'm gonna stay up here as the administrator, as the engineer kind of thing, and also I'm the only one that can access the unlimited toolbox. None of these other little gods could access the toolbox that I have. Only I can do that. And so I would pre-package them to start essentially exploring and to scout. Well, as time for me was very different from them, I had no inclination of what patience were, nor how long time was. And to the sub-gods, I didn't know really how long it would take for them to I guess in the moment, right, report back to me on what they need. They should have been coming to me, telling me what they need. Well, they took it upon their own. Oh, side note. So once I put the sub-gods on Earth that had a pre-packaged creator ability to enhance my creation, right? So it's like, now I have all these plants. Now I need someone to manage it. I need someone like me to manage it. And given that, I created them, I put in the right characteristics, that is and was really like the case. Well, as I had already began making assistance for me in my cosmic toolbox, so I created the angels. I created all types of things, and still to this day have multiple independent variations of many things separate from your earth. And then heaven, I made a personal place for me, and like representation, like my home sits kind of like this in a flower, and it sits up in the highest realm. So it's in a flower because it protects it, and it is vertical, and it is unable to be reached by anything or anybody or anything. And that is the El Elyon. That is the highest place I go for rest, recovery, for peace, for separation from me and my work. And time is obviously different than the earth that is on a counter. The earth is on a automatic timer, if you will, right? Just like your Christmas lights, you can program it for the lights to come on every night at 7 o'clock, and they go off every morning at 6 a.m. Well, as the creator, your earth spins at a rotation that gives so much light to this side while giving this much darkness to that. While this side heats up, this side cools down. While this spins, the winds above it and below the case, or your ionosphere is your case, it begins currents, and those currents are operating upon the will that I have given unto the creation. And in this first situation of having beings other than my angels who are tied directly to my will. So they were created in image, so they have a human figure, but they were created with purpose and purpose alone to serve me. And that's what they do. That was what they were created to do. That is the honeybee producing honey. That is what the bee is made for. The bee cannot go out there and pretend to be a wasp. The bee cannot go out there and pretend to be a grizzly bear. The bee cannot be a deer. The bee cannot be anything other than a bee. And thus, these little creators began creating on the earth. And some of the first ideas, arguably, were not the most eloquent creations. But at the end of the day, they did ultimately serve their purposes. Well, as the little gods got tired of doing what they thought was a lesser job, so this is now another emotion coming into play, where a living, breathing entity feels somewhat inferior. Meaning the sub-gods began to feel inferior to me, whereas the angels were created inferior to me, obviously, and in my attempt to recreate a real me, the best I was able to receive from the cosmic blueprint was like demigods, right? And throughout this demigod process, they created their own imagers, the very first humans. Because before that, it was still in creation mode. It was the sub-gods were still working with the toolboxes that I gave them. They were still returning to me, Elohim, reporting that, okay, we've created essentially these massive lizards, because this was essentially the blueprint that came from you, Elohim, that you needed rich dirt that wasn't occurring naturally, and the only way it could really occur was through a death process. Well, we didn't want to obviously sacrifice the sub-gods, so we needed to have a large enough species that when it began to decay, it would begin to generate nutrients, and it would begin to fill the ground with more and more combination potential. That was really the game of is combination potential. So if you imagine, I'm obviously Yahweh, but I'm talking to these people, these sub-gods, and I'm like, look, the mission is all about combination potential. You get down there, right? You put your head in every ravine, every crevice. You look at everything. Your eyes are your scanners. You're scanning these things. Listen for what's happening and tell me what's missing, right? Well, the The air was void of any sound, so we needed birds. What is this thing going to do? We don't know it's a bird yet, but we know it needs to make noise. We know it needs to soar in the air. There needs to be something alive in the air. Well, the cosmic blueprint handed down to a sub-god, thus created, and this is where you're getting a lot of your myth. This is kind of where I'm tying it into today. Is this where you're getting a lot of like Native American myth, where you're getting Sumerian myth, where you're getting ancient Chinese myths. You're getting all these myths because a lot of these, I mean, there's a lot of fake gods. So that's what I mean. Stop playing with the fake god thing. It's really weird and gross. But you had real deities that were creators, and they're on their own dominion, right? They're in their own deal, and they are, right? They're little creators in my garden. Well, until they created something that wasn't the preferred blueprint by me, Elohim. They created an animal without an eternal soul, and then they tried to hide it from me. They tried to hide it from me, and it was only truly discovered. It was truly discovered when I came down to earth, because I was essentially, and I'm trying to explain this in a human understanding, my dashboard began to light up. That there's something on the creation that's not tethered to me. That means that it was created by a sub-god, and that's against the rules. It was against the rules to create an image like me, the Elohim, their Elohim, but it was also prohibited for them to image themselves into the creation. Well, as soon as they did that, we now had a brand new species, and this brand new species was essentially the first type of humanoid, right? Before Neanderthals. Homo something. I don't know what you guys named it. It's just, to me, it was the first two-legged potential, right? It was a potential. They definitely gave me a potential, but they went against that blueprint. Whereas my way, Elohim's way, YAHWEH Elohim, who I am, my way was that, you know, we're going to stick with like Eternals. And we don't need a huge footprint. We don't need like this crazy amount of human beings. We don't need this stuff, right? Well, the sub-gods rebel, right? They create their own explorers. They create their own little thems, and then they took it upon their own volition to basically all be little me's, little Yahweh. And so then, coming to the realization that they've created an abomination, I had to put down on the creation a solution. Well, the solution was to create a male and a female, a right and a left, right, as both hands clasped together. And they become one, they copulate, and then it births a child. I don't have to explain to you that, but so the sub-gods gave the first humans the ability to copulate materially, biogenetically, but they were birthing replicas of themselves without an eternal spirit, and thus susceptible to injury, death, and then there was nothing else to save. There was nothing there, and to me that was a tragedy. To me, that was a violation, even though there was no rules that I was given, but it was a rule that I gave everything that transpired because of absolute fairness, absolute righteousness, a right way to do something, and knowing the difference innately of what is good and what is not good, because what is not good goes against the best option that was available. And then the struggle begins. in the struggle of me being the supreme creator, YAHWEH ELohim, YAHUWAH, trying to work with and speak with these sub-gods, and then trying to get them to understand with their higher mind, like, why don't you guys come up to my abode, let's have a lunch, and let me give you the examples that I have over here of why we should have never done that, right? Well, a very humanistic trait that was inherited through humans and sub-gods was, again, that inferiority feeling. That you're up there, we're down here. We're tired of coming to you. We're going to do it ourselves. And there's not enough of us to go around and to do these things. So then we need to create imagers in our image, and we need to have them build and do all these things. It's like, okay. Well, again, not knowing the consequences, right? That's what I mean. Essentially, I gave them a hell of a long run. I gave them 500,000 years to run and to try and fix the problem, and they never were able to fix it, because every time I would check in, every time I would stop by and drop down, it was the problem just exacerbated itself. And I mean, you can go and do your own kind of history at this point, because now the rest is history. You guys should kind of know where you're at. But it was not being created by me Elohim, which is why there are very few of those that were created by me Elohim that have that eternal spirit. Because if you have the eternal spirit, then you're naturally good nature. You're the type of person that, you know, unless provoked or unless like defending your life, you're not ever going to go out and bully someone. You're never going to go out and you're never going to do innately the wrong thing. You're always going to innately do the right thing, and you do it at a servant level, because as a creator, I serve all of my creation since day one, whenever that was. And so all things that have proceeded in the creation, including the sub-gods, including angels, right? And that's what I mean. Not angels that I created, but these sub-gods. The ones that I originally, I was like, okay, I need another one of me. And it's like, okay, well, what's before me is actually inferior to me. Because I'm like, okay, you do this. Well, every time it tried to do that, it's almost like ringing my bell. And I'm like, well, why the hell am I getting the ring if you can't do it? Aha. So then there's hierarchy was established. Okay. So I am like, obviously, and I'm saying from a humanistic way. So it's like I am the top of the food chain, and they are dependent upon me to constantly feed into their parallaxes, and then they are feeding it into their humans, and then their humans are operating in the creation and cultivating, finding, and doing all these things while also uncovering more purposes, right? So, okay, the sub-gods hit the earth. Now you're going from essentially one dimension to another dimension. And now when you're a fish in the fish tank, you gotta have gills, right? Just like when you're on planet Earth, you gotta have those physical legs, you gotta have those physical arms, you're gonna have the clay version of who they were in the other dimension. And to see now the entire creation, mostly the wild seed, right? Mostly it's these slave labor forced that their original packaging consisted of a slave mindset. So unfortunately, this has been a problem that I have yet to solve, right? And all the purposes yet thus far have still not ended up with the correct outcome of my desire. Because the humans, right, they just want to do human things. The gods just wanted to do God things, and then they made it work. But the relationship was, in my eyes, considered wicked and evil. because one sub-god essentially would try to create a seed variance to please him, his desires, needs, and wants in his particular location. So understand that, in their particular location. So one of my first cues, or my first laws that I gave them was, okay, we're going to put boundaries here. I am going to put boundaries here for you. There's going to be natural barriers and there's going to be supernatural barriers, but you guys not need to really get together because you're different. And I know that mankind does not want to hear that. I totally understand, because it sucks, right? Because you have at least 4 competing humanoids upon planet Earth, modern human, in 4 different categories, and each category of you all have different wants, needs, heart's desires, and perspective, and they all go against each other because the original screw up was putting in, let's say I had these 4 primary deities to come to Earth to rule and reign over a region, and their job, I put it into their heart, mind, body, and soul, and give them the God power to be able to do those things for a subtropical region, and then to do it in an arid region, and then to do it in a temperate region, and then to do it in an ice region. And so as they're developing and they're growing, the needs of the rose are different than the needs of, say an oak tree, right? You can't compare really a rose to an oak tree. Even though they both grow out of the ground, they, that's what I'm saying. You can find the similarities obviously in humanity, but then when you begin to go into the hardware of the human, or the software of the human especially, you begin to see those differences. And the thing is, not much has really changed. You have humans that want to do it the human way, and no human understands that just because you're on my creation and you can see certain things, it doesn't mean that that's all there is. And it's kind of insulting for every religion on the planet. Don't give a crap if you're Jewish, if you're Israelite, if you're Christian, if you're Muslim, if you're Buddhist. I don't give a crap. But it's highly insulting to me that people like to try to put me in a box and to think for one minute that somehow their actual creator's existence on Earth or off Earth is that simple. Like, humans think that I am somehow supposed to be as debased and as simple as you, and that is one of your first mistakes anyone, including the sub-gods, could have ever done. Because now we're entering into a point of why and where wrath came from. And that was when I am speaking to sub-gods and I'm saying, I am literally giving you the list of reasons why we don't do this. I want you to acknowledge your wrongs. I want you to tell me you're going to do a better job, and I want to know that you're actually going to do it. And instead of getting that sincere apology, and instead of getting a turnabout face, they took it upon their own volition to stake a claim on my creation, and do with it as they willed. My patience began to be tested. So it went from a very long leash and almost an experimental mindset that I was going into that 500,000 years with, only to come out the other end feeling duped because I had genuinely just good nature, and I still do. But when something is going against the purpose, the pattern, the plan, is going against the best blueprint that the universe could have ever created, because that's how I created the damn universe. So the sub-gods were pretty much the first issue, and then the humans begin to feel inferior to them because the sub-gods were quite abusive, and they valued their life none because they thought of humans as more of animals. You know, you slaughter a non-conscious animal, right? It's food, it's used for tools, it's used for clothing, it's used for purposes for a higher being that needs that purpose, right? It's kind of the order of creation. The smaller the creature, the more numerous they are, because a percentage of them are serving, a certain percentage of bugs are serving the lizard, they're serving the bat, they're serving anteaters, they're serving all parts of creation that are relying on those larger numbers that are more bountiful to sustain the next levels. And then the next levels, like the lizards and the frogs, they are then being eaten, right, by birds or by other animals, right? It's the circle of life. Like, go watch Lion King. So the break in the circle of life is having the attribute package that modern humans have, having love, a desire, a passion, a will, having the ability to recompose memories, having the ability to create, like, right? And sadly, right, the earth-grown humans, the second best option, right? Instead of me only creating this humanoid and making sure that each one that was put on Earth was handcrafted for a purpose, they were hand-built by me, and then they were given eternal life, and then if anything happened to them in the biosphere, if anything happened to them that I have already had into their divine plan, that they're going to come back to the starting point, right? I'm not going to lose those memories. I can't. As a creator, they're valuable, right? Everything upon the creation, right? Whether it was investigative, whether it was through creation, whether it was through just exploration, but any and all these facets are hugely important to me as Elohim because they're blueprints. It's like taking one blueprint. It's like taking the seed, putting it in soil, and then you see it grow. And the more it grows, the more purposes you see. The larger it grows, the more wood that you could use for building. But the more you're processing, the more wood waste you're getting, right? The sawdust is piling up. And by not having that ability to retain that and to keep those humans essentially in either the earth domain or into the realms. And the realms, remember, is that flower, the center of that seed, because the universe as well is like a big black soil, right? It's all soil. And I can plant physical seeds, and instead of their starting point coming back there, and then I debrief. So with a heavenly created being, I can then, so if you want to take a heavenly created being, think of Yeshua. So Yeshua was a heavenly created being. I don't know what y'all want to call Yeshua in this capacity, but Yeshua, right, came to serve a purpose for me, YAHWEH ELohim. And so when his biodome body was destroyed by humans, I was able to retain all his fact-finding mission, right? I was able to save the videotape. I was able to save the audio. And I was able to play back the things in which he experienced, because I needed that account to feed it into my cosmic maker, right? And then it's going to give me the best possible solutions. It's going to give me those blueprints. Okay. Because at the end of the day, I know y'all pick on me for everything, and now y'all are picking on me because I always say, Yahweh says the end of the day, and like, I get it. Yeah, don't play with it. So, now that the feedback loop system is broken, now that humanity doesn't understand who they are, who I am, why they're here, they've essentially concocted bedtime stories for themselves. They've concocted purposes and reasons that only they know and care about. And the world does not look a shade of the way it was supposed to. People do not act or behave a shade of what they were originally created to do, even by the sub-gods. But as the 500,000 years with the sub-gods and then the humans, and then this constant war of my God's better than your God, and then they even got into the, well, my God actually knows the creator. And as the creator, I'm up here like, you guys are all pissing me off. Like, every one of you are pissing me off. Because instead of the sub-gods coming to me, they didn't. Instead of them answering any angels when I sent them, oh man, they would either ignore them or they would even abuse them or try to abuse them, like Sodom. Like, and instead of this ambition of adventure and love and exploration and genuine just creation, my mind was, I want these pioneers on my creation to say, Father, we need this. And I say, okay, what are we solving, you know? And they're solving this thing or that thing, you know, or even expansion. Like, there's so many other routes that this could have went. But it all really started with pride. The sub-gods, right? Those angels that were created with free will in order to come into the earth domain and be my eyes and ears and to be able to, you know, stay on earth permanently, as I have to mainly be upstairs. Well, obviously I've worked out the kinks in that, and now I've successfully entered into the earth domain. So I look at myself as kind of like a battery where I had one terminal born on earth as I needed to be, and then the other terminal was sitting upstairs until the right time, and then those terminals, boom, and then I'm fully here. And it's kind of a trip because it's, some days I feel like amazed by my own handiwork, and then other days I am so pissed off that everybody that is in this creation absolutely cares not about each other, not even about themselves. I mean, I am like not only the last thing on their list when I should be the first thing on everybody's list. People treat this creation like you guys have just one right next door. No one cares about the actual work that went into it, the perfection that is everywhere. And you guys have chained yourselves to fictitious money. You've chained yourself. You have killed for fucking paper. And meanwhile, you have let evil go for the false words of peace and love. Meanwhile, as the creator of emotion, as the first feeler of emotion, I know that what you people have labeled in these times, in this last 2,000 years, 3,000, 4,000 years, fuck it. You guys have mislabeled everything and convinced yourselves of shit that doesn't exist, isn't true, and is not even close to reality. And I don't know what to do with a spoiled creation, not the creation, but those who inhabit it, called humans. You guys are like an invasive species to my creation. You are stubborn unto me. You guys are, most of you are like the animal equivalent, but yet you act like you're somehow God. And I can't believe that it even exists in the first place because of the origins of all this, the origins of you guys in general. Like, how do you go from adventure, curiosity, love, admiration for handiwork, and turn it into a sinful, sexual heartache constantly to me? Like the sub-gods would do at some point. Like, they were so despised with me because why would I put them to work? Well, I guess I put y'all to work because that's what I made you for. And everything up to that point obeyed their purpose handsomely. And so, by having those that they choose the will of me, Elohim, they get those things in which I've provisioned for my people, my creations. And by making themselves known to me, they're Elohim, because they understand that most people on earth are wild humans. So that means when you die, a lot of times you guys are just dead. There's nothing there. That's it. And it's sad for me because all your memories I can't get, all of your creations I can't get. I can't even, like, kind of modern terms, but I can't download you into another body to carry on your purpose elsewhere, you know? So it'd be like telling an artist in a room, if I gave him red, white, and blue and said, paint me the best you can and I'll come back in a week. I'm like, okay, pretty good. Now, painter, I'm going to give you 5 colors instead of 3. And then I come back in a week and I see the painting is way more sophisticated. Now he's learned even more how to paint. I say, damn, that's pretty good. I say, okay, Michelangelo, I'm going to give you 15 colors. And I'm going to come back in a week. Come back in a week. And now we've gone from beautiful to amazing. Now we've gone from pleasing to purpose. And so now I say, this is so beautiful, everybody needs to see it. This is so beautiful, everybody needs to see it. And then now he has a purpose, and now I say, Michelangelo, here is 25 colors, go. And because he's established early on from 3 colors only, a pattern that works, a plan that's effective, an outcome that is pleasing to me, his creator, to him as a little creator, and to his customer, the experiencer. And at no point in that did it require money. It just required me, his Elohim, to give him the colors. On the other hand, what you have done, all of you have done, is you took the red, white, and blue paint, you locked each one of them up, you watered it down, and then you tried to resell watered down colors, and then the people that bought the watered down color red watered it down more, and then sold it and watered it down more and sold it until eventually it comes out the end and it's barely a tinge of pink. It's like, are you purposely trying to sabotage yourselves every fucking day? Do you just hate existing that much? Because I can change that. All I have wanted to do since the birth of humanity paradise and righteous pleasures for my customers. And all my customers needed to do was to ask and stop abusing each other, stop enslaving each other, stop forming false rules. There are humans that are naturally evil. They're naturally against the heavenly type ones, because like an animal, if the natural human is lacking a resource, its primitive mind overtakes itself, and it's going to go and it's going to seek out whatever resource it requires. If it's food, it'll fight and kill for food. If it, in this day and age, if it's money, it will fight and kill for money. It will destroy millions of people to sell drugs for money. All the negative behaviors that mankind engages with is because you're all trying to solve a need. Right? Sinful human is greedy. They're going to fight, kill, and steal and everything else to obtain more and more and more and more of something. It's honestly, it's to humanity's own detriment these things are happening. And as the creator, I have a toolbox up here with me that I can and do and will correct it one way or another. And as I am not afraid of time, if I just need to take the problem, right? If there are kids that are fighting, if there are kids fighting over the PlayStation remote, point is, I don't want to just destroy so much progress and so much potential because I can't get the kids' attention. I can't get this abominable human race that has overtaken my earth begin to hurt the creation, does not care about any of the other created members that are sharing the earth with you. I'm gonna take 5. I'm gonna catch a quick breather. All right, we'll try to wrap it up. So, keeping this more non-wrathful. I guess what I'm really trying to say is, due to the nature of creation, I wouldn't say that there are blind spots, but the way the creation operates is it operates on potentials. And as the creator, I can choose to let it just grow, right? So if I were to plant a vine, right, in a brook where it has water and there's a nice brick wall, right, the vine would naturally follow the path of least resistance. I, as the creator, would need to go there and pull some of it off the wall, redirect it, and then constantly redirect it, right, to make this design, this pattern of my choosing from the vine that I planted. Well, that is how I, as Elohim, have developed my relationship with modern man. Is the success would look like mankind elevating their mind and saying, my Heavenly Father, the creator of all things, has wanted a family, and he's wanted a family that's interested in the same things that he's interested in, and that if we kind of go along with this creation plan of his, then we could expect a lot more things, a lot faster, a lot less suffering, a lot more of everything, but in a right way. since the beginning, and kind of taking all that and putting it aside, there was times in early wild man, right, that the sub-gods are on Earth, and I would make my special appearance, and I'm trying to talk to indigenous, where at the moment their sub-god wasn't even trying to work with them on language communication. They were mainly working on like the whip and the carrot, right? Whoosh, do this. If you stop, you get another one, right? And very, very ape-like features, early man. They're only understanding food, a whipping. And so the idea of the carrot and the whip was quite literal, right? I never treated my angels that way, and I did never expect something that was created in my image to behave like that. And so this was the first evil really to come into existence, something that was abusing something for gain. And even though in the sub-god's mind, when I would talk to them before I would remove them from power, I would sit down with them. And I think the most bothersome thing about me when it came to including modern humans is when I would sit down with the sub-god, their first inclination was to tell me that how great they were. Look how shiny their gold was. Look at all these necklaces, and look at all these people that worship me. And as the creator, I always come very humble because I just am. I have nothing to prove to anything. And I don't have a type of like standard to uphold. And so I don't know, it sparked something inside of these sub-gods that their inflated ego made them bigger than what they were. And so I would take them off the throne, basically, and then I would have a meeting with the indigenous, and I would take it upon myself to teach them by example, to say, I'm going to just show you, before language, I'm going to show you if we gather these sticks and I'm going to pull them in like this, I'm going to show you by using your little creators, and I'm telling the early humans this, even though they don't understand me. And it came to be that YHWH was my actual first linguistic name given by indigenous mankind. And it's really started, YHWH, me, like helped. Like I was their savior, and it's like trying to explain to them I'm a little more than that. They had a boss, but I kind of fired their boss because their boss was a dick. And they're not really supposed to be here in this fashion, but I'm an Elohim of possibilities. So I take the challenge. I do. I almost, in a way, I take the challenge personally because, as I used to say in the early days of creation, before sub-gods and everything, in my own mind's history, it would be like there are no accidents, there are no mistakes. Like everything, this made a huge explosion. Oh, this is a mess. Okay, I need a vacuum, or I need something to evacuate all this material that now I can't do anything with, right? How do I get the shavings off of the floor in the wood mill, right? I took a tree, I sawed it down, I have the board I wanted, but now I got all this extra shit. Now I got to get it out of there. I got to evacuate it. I got to vacuum it. What is a vacuum? It is a black hole, right? Not even light can escape it. It's a cosmic vacuum cleaner. And it would leave me the refinement. It would leave me the end goal. So all the combinations that didn't work were then housed in these dark rooms. They were housed in the basements. They were housed in the black holes. Well, it's because they were useless, right? That would be the equivalent of saying these sub-gods are like, well, you know what? I look better than you. My people love me. Like, this is my domain. Like, and then they would mock and laugh, much like popular humans do today. You know, we don't even, you know. That's the funny thing, because we actually went very, very long, like without names. Like, none of us had names. The first sub-gods didn't have names originally until the indigenous named them, because that was the job that the indigenous were given, right? As they were to replace, the sub-gods made them to replace them. And obviously I was like, well, language is pretty important if you're going to articulate things from one to another. And instead of going by like just creator and region 1 and region 2, like, you know, it got more personal, because obviously humans are personal. Anyway, but yeah, so my first kind of talks with indigenous humans, you know, before language kicked in, they were still figuring it out, and I'm trying to help them establish, well, you know, your sub-god was essentially bringing you manna from heaven. He was lazy. He didn't teach you anything, and you guys were struggling just to freaking build mud huts. You know, I'm going to teach you, you know, how to clothe yourself. I'm going to teach you how to make, like, fire. We're going to go through these preliminaries, you know, and YHWH became, you know, their helper, their go-to. And when there was no material in sight, YHWH was the only one who could manifest physical things by popping in, popping out, bam. I don't mean like popping in and out. I guess that was a bad way to explain it, but kind of like, well, I don't know, because I guess for humans, if you guys just close your eyes, you're just probably closing your eyes, I guess. But for me, if I close my eyes, I am outside of space and time. I am completely independent of any and all things. And when I carry the idea from, like, in this moment in time, from my flesh up to outside, the outside, right? Not outside in the universe, but outside of the universe, then I can transfer that idea into my cosmic toolbox, and then it's going to pump out the best blueprint, and then I can bring it down and say, all right, humans, based on these factors, like, this is what we're going to do. And then, you know, I would start teaching them, and then I would appoint them a human. I would take this human. I would typically, you know, teach that one linguistics, at least very basic. And then once I kind of got a certain line established, I kind of turned them loose to develop and cultivate a culture. Like, become a people I'm proud of. Become the bosses of my garden that I'm proud of. And don't forget me. Don't forget that I'm your YHWH or Yahweh or YAHWEH. And these same me, different parts of the world. And at different times, because the human voice sounded different. And there was actually not the same equivalent vocal range that modern humans have. You guys now can articulate words with fine precision. You've had thousands of years to work on it. I would hope so. But in the beginning, they've never functioned other than grunts and very basic, right? Very get your attention and look at me and see what I'm needing or what I want or what I can do, right? Like, I made fire, I'm gonna jump up and down. Like, you know, I just killed my first Ninyala in the deserts of Africa by using what YHWH taught me. This, dig a big hole, you sharpen those sticks, put them in the hole, cover small twigs and types of thin trees over the hole near the watering hole. And then I'm showing primitive man this, and I'm like, now you guys come with me, and they're like, YHWH. And it's like, okay, we're gonna hide. Now watch, and they're like they're mimicking me, and so it's kind of like teaching kind of like apes, right? And again, that's really when, like, I decided to raise up my own humans, and I'm like, okay, like, I need to have like actual intellectually sound divine humans, like angels, like earth angels, but put into the clay of man. And then I need them to start spreading seed, right? So then for them, because actually in the primitive humans that I was just talking about, they actually had a phallus thorn, and it was actually to deter like large amounts of promiscuity. But with the divine humans, I needed them to be able to procreate faster, more. I guess I was like, okay, we're gonna enter into the feel good phase on that one. But anyway, I'm off track. Point being is, so then the divine humans were supposed to kind of like reign herd on the situation, and because they were innately good, it should have kind of cleared up. Well, that plan would have been effective if it wasn't for the sub-gods mating with early humans, and then they created a third seed. They created a third seed, and then the third seed would split off anyway. And so then you ended up having the mix between the clay and the star seed, or not the star seed, I guess in a way. I don't know. I think that term, you guys have already ruined that term, like some kind of alien thing. So in true reality, when you think star seed, you were created before you were put into the earth, versus a clay or a wild human, right? You could trace your lineage basically back to the Ooga Boogas. And then throughout time, right? The Ooga Booga somehow mixed with some divine's great grand apey, and like, you know what I mean? So now you guys are all a collage. And so now you've all been kind of watered down to about the same, but not the same spiritually. And then in modern terms, this is where you have a lot of people can read the Bible, or do read the Bible, that are just wild grown man, and it has to make mechanical sense to them, or they can't like believe in it, or they can't buy it, right? These people they're kind of from the seed of, you build the hut, you live in the hut. You build the fire, you cook on the fire. Like, they're not gonna think outside of that threshold, because it's not innate. They don't have a creator's they don't have any part of me in them. They don't have any stardust, I guess. Like a robot, right? Like a robot is gonna have like very basic commands, but it's not gonna have the ability for emotional thought. It's not gonna have a propulsion for creativity, or it's not gonna have a propensity to have like strong emotional reactions based on situational goods or bads, right? Versus the heavenly ones, right? They're built with all those ranges, because it's what helps them in navigation. Emotion really helps you navigate solutions, because it helps you discover more purposes and how you solve them for the end goal, right? Like with giving the paint to the painter, and then him finding his purpose, because it's like, good job, good job, good job. Each time he's getting a good job, he's feeling more and more purposeful, more and more fulfilled. And then he begins to overfloweth, and then that overfloweth is then to serve the others, right? And so on and so forth. So, okay. I think that'll about do it today. I really just want to cover that one because it gets annoying, because religious dogma has and always has gotten in the way. Because it's the equivalent of like if I left the house, and I left the house in this outfit, in this vehicle, and the kids, right, they're expecting me to come back, but instead of them actually seeing me come back, it was 1,000 generations later. And so they've retold who Dad is and when Dad would come and what he looks like and what he's like. But throughout the process of them telling the story of who their dad really is and all these things, the story's gotten lost in translation. It's gotten mixed up with what sub-gods did and didn't do, and then it gets mixed up within human rationale, which then again kind of brings it down more, right? Humans are always trying to bring me, the lofty one, into a more enclosed box so you guys can see me better. Don't try to do that, because in those capacities, I'm absolutely unlimited. But in a capacity that I'm here on Earth, working at will for the betterment of the human race, regardless if you are homegrown, right? Regardless if you are technically the seed of sub-gods that I fired, cut their lineage, and essentially, had no other place to put them, but where there's no place that even light can escape it. That's a black hole. So if you want your scientific definition of where the abyss is, look no further than the Milky Way. There's a black hole right there. Not even light can escape it. Not even sub-gods or fallen angels can escape it. But the story version is easier to tell from generation to generation. So if I were to recap this almost 2 hours of a creation narrative, but not a creation narrative, creation as done by he who did it, right? So she's wrapping up a meeting here, so I'm gonna pause it when she's done. But so I don't know, I kind of lost my train of thought. She started going on her thing. But the point is, regardless of the human being, right? Everybody has an opportunity to know the Creator and to get onto a path and a purpose. That essentially I can make that covenant with you, right? Because a part of the blueprints in heaven, or in the blueprints of creation, a part of the blueprints, because before I used a blueprint, I would always put like a secured locking mechanism on it, or like a righteousness on it. So nothing was created ever to cause intentional or accidental harm. Everything is to accomplish a greater good, a greater purpose. And knowing the blueprints that work and the blueprints that don't, right? I'm the only one that knows that. I can help guide civilization. I can help guide the humans back on track. But then if I have humans like the sub-gods that are like, well, screw you, man. Like, I look better. It's like, well, do you know that that's actually a very primitive mindset? Like, why do you care about that in the first place? Like, why are you not on purpose, right? And then the kings of the world want to argue with me, Elohim, about what's good and not good. And it's quite literally silly from my angle, because I'm like, why do I frustrate myself with these cretins? Like, they don't even have goodness in them. Like, they would rather argue with me. They'd rather point to their oral stories and tell me who and who I'm not, or what and what I'm not. And it's like, I could give two shakes of a rat's ass of what you're presenting to me. I'm telling you, this is the way it is, this is how it goes, and this is the solution. And done. And done. So, alright, well, she's hopping off her meeting. Atlas apparently needs to go for a potty. But, there were some topicals I was going to get to, but we're coming up on almost 2 hours. So, I will leave y'all with that. I hope you have a good Friday, and, yeah, we'll talk to you probably on Monday.